So we're good. Okay, we'll get everybody to come back together here, and we'll get started, and I'll try to get through this quickly, and if you're here for motivation, you might be in the wrong place. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Josh Davis. Some of you guys, I introduced myself earlier. I teach at North Rock Creek, which is down by Shawnee. So I'm excited to kind of visit about our program and maybe its uniqueness and some of the things that I do. Some of the stuff is not rocket science. I mean, a lot of it will be things that you guys have heard or maybe that you do, and a lot of you guys do some of these things even way better than I do. And Emily called me a few weeks ago and she said, "Hey, you want to help with the in-service?" And I said, "Well, yeah, whatever you need." And she said, "Well, how about talk about motivation and COVID-19 and challenges and struggles?" And I was like, oh my gosh, like I have had so many of those over the last few years, and I'm sure most of us have. And so I thought, well, I don't know if I'm the best person to talk about motivation, but I do have some things that I think I can share and some things to maybe talk about, and I may be kind of confined to this little space to try to click through with my mouse here. But that's what we're going to talk about. What are some of the things maybe that have happened over the last few years? How is that influencing students? Maybe our own mindsets a little bit, and where are we at? And so feel free to stop me at any time and ask any questions. But I did this yesterday evening. Like a bunch of you guys have been doing a lot of different things this summer, and we just got back from vacation and have been doing some other different things. And so here we are today, and I apologize. I'm still trying to play catch up. So are you finding it hard to keep students motivated? Is it a daily struggle to get them involved? Can't get students to reach their goals or potential? What are some things that we can do or look at? Or maybe just what are some situations that maybe we haven't thought about this year or over the last few years that we can kind of look at? So maybe take a few minutes and write some things down. Why do you think students lack motivation? What are some changes that you've seen in students? These are a couple of questions that I think we ask ourselves a lot of times, and I think as I've been to different FFA activities and events, things that we do from Colt Conference and Colt Conference is like September, like school just started, to OYE and spring break. It seems like this is the fundamental thing you always hear about. Oh, I can't get students motivated. Kids aren't just like they used to be. And so there's this big challenge. And so maybe take a couple minutes, write a few of those things down. I would say I've been teaching, this is going to start my 14th or 15th year, and students have changed even a lot since I started teaching. Mr. Coulter, I'm sure you can talk about, and some of you guys that have been teaching longer can talk about how they've changed over y'all's careers. But it's unique, and I think it's different, and I think there's some things to look at and think about. So maybe just take a little bit, jot down a couple of things. And I may have a couple people share their thoughts. So, and this is really a question, as you guys are writing this down, that I asked myself several years ago. I kind of started like, well, what is the thing where did students start changing, and what are all these things that we see, this instant gratification and stuff that we talk about? And I had a teacher a few years ago, one of our English teachers, and she said, she had a professor or teacher or somebody that said when CDs were invented, I think that was the first time you could skip to the track you wanted. That was like VCRs, you had to rewind. Okay, some people may not know what VCRs are. I mean, those kinds of things. Cassette tapes, you could rewind. You had to rewind those, right? But CDs, you could instantly skip to that track. And then now, obviously, we just right then and there. It's whatever the thing is that we're after, whether it's information or music or whatever. So another thing I'll say real quick, students have changed. A big change that we were talking about the other day, I was with some other teachers, and I would say this probably isn't fair or nice, but students are softer than they used to be. And one of the things that we talked about is, I can remember when I first started teaching, and maybe I've mellowed out a little bit, but I can remember getting really mad at a kid in the shop for pulling an extension cord out of the wall funny or something like that, and just ripping into them, and or on a judging team or something like that. And now if you do that, they cry or they want to quit or they just, I don't even know. So there's some differences there, but I think there's some other things to think about. So anybody want to share? Mr. Coulter?
I think parents have changed.
I would agree with that.
And that's changed the kids, because parents do way more for their kids than what
Sure.
my parents used to do for me. You know, my parents was like, if you want to do it, you're going to have to work for it. Now it's
Just kind of
spoon-fed.
handed.
I think kids want to be spoon-fed, and as long as we spoon-feed them, they're not going to be motivated.
I think that's a great point, and I think you talk about like what's easy. They maybe want the easy way out sometimes, not all the time. What else? Anybody else? Ms. Dale?
Fear and anxiety. This year I've had just a lot of what I've never had in the past. The reason that they tell me they don't want to do the steps of the cutting torch or give up and then give the creed is fear, anxiety, not being cool for their peers.
Yeah.
And it's caused a lot of like, where do you step in to help with that? Where does that lie within, getting out of your comfort zone and pushing yourself? But also like, again, a girl had a full-on panic attack in the shop one day, and I was just like, okay, maybe just like video it and send it to me. I don't know what to do about that.
I've got a really good story. I hope I don't forget to come back to that. What else? Why do they lack motivation? What are other reasons?
I'll tack on to what she said. What I've noticed is that a lot of that fear and insecurity has just created apathy. Like, it doesn't come across as anxiety. It comes across as, I'm going to fail, so I'm just not even going to
Not going to try. Yep.
That's
Yep.
what my husband, and he kind of handles the shop, and he says it's because they're scared to fail, so they won't try at all.
Won't try at all.
So it
Yep.
looks like they won't try at all.
Yep. I'll let you go ahead and talk. No?
I guess being younger, obviously, coming out of high school recently, more recent than probably most, I was around in high school when technology was a big thing. I had online classes in high school, and so I could knock out a class, 2 classes in 30, 45 minutes. So why would I want to sit there for a whole hour to just take care of one class?
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's just kind of time too.
And I think those are all things that as we could continue to talk about this the whole hour and not get to any of the rest of that stuff, because we all have been in those similar situations. And I would tack on to what you were talking about in the shop. I couldn't figure out earlier this year, so let me back up. North Rock Creek, you guys heard me say maybe earlier, and if you haven't, it's a brand new program, 3 years old. We started the year of COVID. We got shut down in the spring. Last year was on again, off again, and then this year we kind of had a normal school year. So it's kind of an urban, suburban type school. I would say we still have some rural kids and that kind of thing, but definitely a demographic of, I would say, more urban type, suburban type kids. And for me, I grew up, like I said, northeastern Oklahoma, very traditional, showed livestock, worked in the shop, judging teams and those kinds of different traditional FFA activities. So I've been trying to figure out how to adjust to these kids, but a really unique thing is I've been trying to do the shop stuff. They never had a shop program. I'll never forget, I had this kid, well, first of all, the boys didn't want to weld in front of each other. And I was like, why are they not welding? Like, I couldn't wait to strike an arc, and like, this is the coolest thing ever. But they didn't want to make a bad weld, and then they didn't want to get made fun of, to kind of what you're talking about, that afraid to fail type deal. And then I had this other boy that we're practicing lighting the torch, and we go through all the steps, and he's just shaking like this. And I'm like, dude, this is not like going to blow up. I mean, it's fine. So it's just really weird that I say weird, that mindset a little bit. But so what are some of those things? Here we go. With maybe where we're at or where we've been that we could maybe look at and think about and try to kind of grasp. These are just some thoughts. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. There we go. Some statistics I tried to pull off the internet. Population in Oklahoma has went up 5.5% over the last 10 years, which is causing more urban sprawl. So Shawnee, where it's at, used to kind of be a more rural area, but as Oklahoma City starts coming east, and maybe if we talk about Tulsa as well, for some of you guys that are from that area, and you look at Broken Arrow, and you look at Owasso, and of course back down to Oklahoma City, and Edmond is into Guthrie, and down to Norman, and so this population increase is creating more urban environments. The diversity index is up 61% population-wise from 54.9% 10 years ago. So that's been a thing for me, again, growing up in a small rural community and primarily where I've taught. Now I'm seeing more, or I'm in a situation where I'm looking more at dealing with kids that are from Native American backgrounds or different cultural diversity background, Hispanic, and African American communities. And so that dynamic, if you think about that, those different cultures, they don't necessarily think the same way that we do about certain things. And I can think of one girl that she's one of her nationalities, she's Hispanic. And like family is a really, really big deal to her. And like haven't been able to figure out over the last couple of years, like, and she's one of my officers, like, you need to be at this or you need to be at that. And I mean, if they got family coming in, she's doing family stuff. And so I'm like, golly, how do I get her more? But that's just something I've had to think about. Less than 40% of Oklahoma kids live with both parents. It's probably the trend that a lot of us would see in most of our schools are single parent family households. They don't have both parents. I was fortunate enough, maybe not everybody in here, I was fortunate enough to grow up with two parents and blessed with that. And so a dynamic that I've probably learned over the years is just how do those single parent households or a lot of times it's just single mothers, how do they operate and what are some of the challenges that they have to deal with and what are some of these kids going through? Roughly 55% of students qualify for free and reduced lunches. And so there's some needs here that students are trying to meet and dealing with. And so I put this up here. Students must Maslow before they can bloom. You guys have all seen this before. Maslow's hierarchy of needs and then Bloom's taxonomy. We all learned this probably when we were going through OSU. It's a big thing. But we spend a lot of time trying to meet these physiological and safety needs. And now we're kind of stretching up into some of these social and self-esteem needs. Kids, they got to get past this before they can get to any of this. And I think probably the thing that I've gained over the last couple of years is really noticing a lot more of this, maybe than the higher system of that, and before we can even get to learning and understanding. And so, really, if you look around your communities, and I know most of you do, and most of you, especially that are in smaller communities, know those families and those situations really, really well. But man, stuff kids are dealing with is just nothing I had to deal with. Like, I just can't even, and I can remember family arguments and problems and, you know, maybe having not enough money at times and having to work and just different things. But man, where we're at in society and some different situations with kids maybe not having enough to eat, the social, emotional kind of struggle are definitely some things there. So I thought it was important to include this and just say, hey, don't forget about this stuff because it is relevant and it is something that I think you can't go to that next tier as an individual until you've met each one of those things. So if we're ever going to get them up here, we've got to be able to help them meet some of those needs there at the bottom. So what are some key factors playing a role in student motivation and their mindset? These are some things I came up with. COVID-19, the family dynamic, you know, it was unique. I think in terms of economy, we can all talk about where we're at with the economy right now and inflation. And just as I've kind of tried to analyze these things, and I'm not right necessarily, I just think about this stuff a lot because I'm trying to figure out where to reach these kids. My first year at North Rock Creek, I remember asking those kids, how many of you guys know what FFA is? Or how many of you have been involved or your parents have been involved in agriculture or were in an FFA class in high school? And a lot of them weren't. And I was just like taken back by that. I thought well, surely they'd have a parent or even a grandparent that was in ag or FFA, and they didn't know. So I'm in a spot where I'm just like really trying to train and teach and help them to understand maybe what our goals are. And then we get into this COVID deal, and now we're here with where the economy is. And I think a lot of that has played into, and those family dynamics have played into the way these kids are thinking about stuff. They're watching mom or dad or, again, whether that's both parents or single parent, or a lot of them are growing up even with their grandparents now. I think that's another unique thing. You didn't hear about as much probably when I was a kid was grandparents raising kids or aunts and uncles. So they're dealing with this family dynamic, and COVID, I think, as we look at through the economy and through societal issues of all that's happened over the last 3 years, has really shifted a lot of them emotionally, and I'd like to be here tomorrow for the workshop that they're going to talk about, I think, some of those things. But if you think about what all we've had school, we've not had school, and kids are resilient, they'll adapt, but there's been a lot of inconsistency. I was telling my superintendent the other day, so we had the COVID deal. Then that summer we also had the the kind of the civil rights stuff, when we had all the different marches, if you will. We've been through this deal now with jobs, not having jobs, gas prices are going up. Some people are trying to figure out what they're doing with their living situations. So economy-wise, do we have money for this? Do we not have money for this? Kids, I think, get that from their parents, and I think those are things, if we're not thinking about that or trying to go, okay, where's this coming from? I think that's important, because to me, that made sense. I thought, well, okay, if this kid can't buy this show animal, that may be because they don't have enough money at home. Their parents are trying to pay rent, or they're worried about going to this alumni camp thing, or whatever it is. And there's stress, I think, that parents are or guardians at home, kids are picking up on, subconsciously maybe. I don't know. That's just a thought. Social media is huge. What kids are doing on their phones and technology and all these social media websites. Oh my gosh, from TikTok to Twitter to Instagram. And I didn't really grow up with a lot of that stuff, Facebook and those kinds of things. So that's been a new thing for me to even kind of learn. I mean, I had a cell phone, I guess, but it didn't have all this other extra stuff. And so you've got these like school culture and peer pressure type stuff, and these are things we always talk about. But I think to Cameron's point, it has just been compounded over the last few years. Other things kids are dealing with, specific trauma, culture, background, religion. Who are their role models? This is a big one that I've kind of watched over the last few years. Kids will talk about who they're hanging out with or who they're looking up to. And I'm like, is that really somebody you ought to be like trying to get advice from, or going down that path? But the big one I think I've seen more, and maybe you guys have too, the stress, anxiety, the self-esteem, the lack of confidence. I'm just not going to do it so I don't fail, so I don't look bad. But you've got like all these different things that I think have been mixed up. And I think kids just, because of the social media platforms, because of the television and movies, they're hit with that stuff in the face every minute of every day. And so I think these are some factors that are playing into their motivation. Am I going to look bad in front of my peers? I don't have the money or the resources to do this. I don't want to let somebody down. I can't do this because I've got a certain limitation, or I can't give a speech because I can't talk. I have a lisp. I don't know. But those are some factors that I think might help as you start to think about motivation and think about kids and what their mindset is behind something. Maybe try to put yourself in their shoes a little bit and just think more about, okay, well, why is this happening, or what is their thought process? I'd have never dreamed a kid wouldn't have wanted to strike an arc with an electrode, but I mean, I just could not figure out why those boys wouldn't do it, and they didn't want each other to make fun of each other's welds. I mean, no, that was it. I thought that's the dumbest thing ever. So what advice do I have for increasing student motivation? I don't know that I have a lot, but I think I can tell you maybe some things that I do or try to do to teach, inspire, and motivate kids, build relationships with those students, develop a positive culture, create a community of purpose. If I can't do great things, I can do small things in great ways. So that point being, there's some little things that I try to do on a regular basis, and I think that's helped. But I wanted to break down each of those top 3 deals there. And I think number 1 is building relationships with students to get them motivated. That's something we always talk about. So what are some things that can help with building those relationships with students? Language and communication. This is something that I've got kind of on the left side here. And I said put yourself in the shoes of others. But how do we positively versus negatively, verbally versus non-verbally communicate with kids? And again, that is different than I think when I first started teaching. You used to hear language like, or sometimes we feel this about ourselves. I'm not sure I know how to train you. I'm not very good at this. Kind of can leave a negative impression in kids versus if you tell them, hey, I know that if we work at this, we can get you, since we just talked about speeches, a good speech topic. Or I know if you will spend 15 minutes a day memorizing whatever, you're going to be ready for that speech or ready for that CDE contest. Or I know if you just go out there and brush your pig for 15 minutes a day or walk your pig, it's going to improve on a regular basis. So I think, how are we saying things? And again, that's something that we probably are just a little bit we probably don't analyze a lot of how we say stuff or what we do. And I had a student. I learned this year. It's just a learning experience, but I would get real kind of in his face about stuff when he wasn't putting safety glasses back, or he wasn't picking stuff up, or whatever, or different things. But he had some, what's that called? Oppositional defiant type tendencies that wasn't in his file or anything. The school hadn't put in there yet. And we had some really bad times of bantering back and forth with each other. And it just became how I approached that kid and what I said that created that negative versus that positive communication. One thing I think we don't probably all the time think about either negative versus positive body language. I know sometimes when I get upset, and I did it this year, I got mad at some freshmen and I went in and I slammed my office door. I don't know which ones of those kids in that class might have got up that morning and mom slammed the door, or dad walked out the door and slammed it, or something like that. Like, what is the things that we do on a regular basis? And we've all done something, I'm sure, that we could think of. What is that body language? I've noticed if I walk into class and I'm dragging, or I'm upset about something with school or something like that, the kids all of a sudden kind of get this negative mindset a little bit. And so it's a daily struggle because there's a lot of stuff that we deal with. But what is your body language? How do you present yourself? I put this positive swagger. Mr. Turner was up here a while ago, and I always tell my kids, or when we go places, I always talk about looking at him, because like if you ever watch him and some of those Owasso kids, they're always walking around with their heads up and their chest out, and I mean they're just proud to be where they're at. And so I talk about that positive swagger a lot of times with kids, and I talk about being present in where they're at and not taking a back seat to other people. And so that's something that we've talked about a little bit. Screen and filter what you say before you say it. This is something I think, especially for younger teachers, and I know myself, sometimes I get caught up in being careful about what topics you're talking about, or what you say just on the spur of the moment, and then you don't think about it till after the fact. You're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Because that's a trap that a lot of us, I think, at times, younger teacher-wise, have fallen into, whether we're talking about music, talking about boyfriends and girlfriends, talking about different topics with kids that maybe we should or shouldn't be talking about. And I think that's for everybody to kind of look at. So building relationships with these students, get to know their student background, establish a system of respect. Don't be afraid to get students, to get to know students and their families, but also remember to maintain a boundary and sense of professionalism. When we're building these relationships, if you're not doing SAE project visits or going out to these kids' houses, I think that's something you need to be thinking about doing. Because we spend so much time with them, you need to be able to understand and know those kids and their backgrounds and their family. And I use them to motivate kids. I mean, I can think of one girl in particular, and I mean, I'll call her mom up or text her or whatever, and I'm like, hey, she should have done this. Why she needs to be doing this. And so don't be afraid to motivate kids by using their parents to motivate them too, because that's something. When I talk about maintaining a boundary or sense of professionalism, we've probably all been there, and this is a hard topic to talk about, I think, sometimes, but it's real easy to develop those close relationships with parents, community members, but don't cross the line. I can't tell you how many times that I've been at a cattle show or something, and they're like, hey, have a beer, and I'm like, no, I'm good. So think about those things. Be aware of when you're at OYE. You're hanging out with those parents and those families, but you're still the professional. You still have to maintain that boundary. But I mean, don't be afraid to get to know them, understand their background, what they're going through. But just remember where that line is at. And so an example that I would again talk about with that is I got two students that I'm pretty close with and fairly comfortable with their parents as well, and they've been talking back and forth about dating each other, and I'd kind of talk to one and I'd talk to the other, and I'm like, I told them there at the end of school, I said, guys, I got to step back from this. I sit in my place. I'm not your parent. And I think a lot of times, because of those kids' situations and we know their home lives, we want to assume that role of their parent, or we want to take on that position maybe in some ways. And so I just tell you to be careful with that, but don't be afraid to use that to motivate kids in terms of getting to know their parents and use their parents. And when you build those relationships, and most of you guys know this, I mean, when you've got their trust and respect, they'll run through a brick wall for you. Most of them will. Another thing I really try to do is establishing a sense of pride and capability helps students see the positives in themselves and continue to build them up with confidence, positive self-attributes. It's a big one. It goes back to that self-esteem thing. Like I'm always trying to talk to these kids about personal pride and self-esteem, and because they always compare themselves to other people, in my opinion. That anxiety, that confidence, those are things that we all, I think, see on a regular basis. And I try to find those times when I catch them saying something that's negative about themselves or maybe about somebody else. Like, hey, this might be the situation and the reason why. Or, hey, you know, you actually have these positive things. Like you're a really positive person in that you always come to class every day and that you smile, or you don't cause a lot of drama. You know, like everybody likes you. You're a very likable person. Or I appreciate that you always go the extra mile to do this. And so like trying to just build those kids up. And I guess that's something unique and different that we go back to earlier and talking about maybe that they're softer. Just positive reinforcement, I guess, is just something they don't get enough of it probably at home because, again, parents are working. They may not see their parents or their guardians or whoever, and all they ever hear is something negative. So you might be that person that can help create that positivity in their life. And again, as you build those relationships, it makes the motivation after that pretty easy. So developing a positive culture, this is something I'm working on because we don't have a culture at North Rock Creek. It's not this traditional place that's had a program for 50, 60 years. They haven't had very many ag teachers. We're trying to figure out where we're at. And so what are some things that I do or some things that I have tried to work at over the last few years? And it's been the biggest challenge of my life. I just never would have dreamed. I really thought, this may be selfishly speaking, but I thought, man, I'm going to go into this position. It's a growing school district. All the resources are going to be available. We're going to have, and man, it just hadn't been that way. And some of that probably because of the economy and COVID and those different things. But I try to talk about motivational quotes a lot, and I put a lot of motivational quotes on the board. That's something that's just unique and different. And I remember last year, not this last year, but the year before last, this last year, I had a student, it was in the spring semester and probably just busy with some different things, but he said, hey, how come you don't put them quotes up anymore? I don't know, I just haven't kept up with it. He's like, wow, that really helped me get through the day, or, you know, I really appreciated those and you should do that again. So that's something, I think, competition. Mr. Turner talked about that before. To me, that's a really, really big deal. And most of us as ag teachers are pretty competitive or want to be competitive. And that's one of the draws, I think, and Mr. Turner talked about that before, is what's the incentive, what's the competition? And I really try to do a good job. I say I try to do a good job. I think that's something that we always talk about, well, who's chasing who? And I've got a couple of students in particular, and the kids always talk about, well, they always have success, or they're always doing this good, or I can't do better than them. And so I've used those students, and I'll say things like, well, yeah, but when so-and-so goes to a show, they're trying to get around somebody else, or when they go to this contest, they're trying to beat somebody. So I take those students, and so for some of my younger 8th and 9th graders, we make the joke, and we're like, hey, I'm going to beat this person, or the goal is to beat this person. And so we're trying to develop this competition amongst themselves in a positive way. And that's been something unique that I think is really, really key in trying to build that competitiveness. Let's see, what else? Everything's a big deal. And let me go back to this bullet, I guess. Classroom FFA environment, building a positive culture there. That's something I really try to get on kids about what they say, how they say things. Like one of the first things right out the gate, the first day of school, I always tell them, like, guys, I don't like mama jokes. Okay, we're not going to talk about each other's families. We're not going to, yeah, you do that in the locker room, this, that, and the other. But again, go back and think about these FFA environments And these places that we're going with kids, whether it's, again, stock shows or whether it's a judging contest, we spend a lot of time with them on the bus or in a vehicle or at these different places. And you guys all know the different lingo and how they talk about stuff, but I think one of the things that's helped me is I'll try to pick up on it. And I'm like, hey, that song just said a cuss word. We ain't listening to that. Hey, we ain't going to run somebody down because whatever. Now, there's, the line of where you can joke about that with kids. But again, just a reminder, some of you guys do this stuff already. But that's a big one on me, how they treat each other in classroom. And again, like I said, that mama jokes deal is just something, and I kind of use a personal story with that. I'm like, guys, you don't know somebody's family situation. You don't know who doesn't have a mama. You don't know all these different things that kids are going through and your peers. And so what position do you have to run somebody down for that? So think about, if you haven't ever thought about what kind of environment are you setting up in your classroom or on these trips and activities, what are you allowing kids to do? I think, again, that goes into motivation. They're not going to want to go to this if they know, well, so-and-so's just going to make fun of me because I didn't know how to place that class, or I didn't know the difference between a steer and a heifer, or I didn't know that left to right was 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't want to go, or whatever it is. But I make everything a big deal. And that kind of goes back to the competitiveness of things. And again, we don't have any... that's unique for some of you guys that have a lot of tradition. But think about things as you're trying to motivate kids, like your county fair, or your county contests, like our Pot County Free Fair has a horticulture contest. And I was like, man, all right, we got to have 4 people. We're going to go judge all these different flowers and tomatoes and these different things. And I gave them the stuff. I'm like, guys, we got to win this thing. There's like 2 teams that show up, okay? But we win it. And I'm like, yeah, we won the horticulture contest, right? So everything is a big deal to me from those county contests. Find something that you can help students have some success with. And then, again, I think Mr. Turner said this before. To me, success breeds success, and that is what kind of intrinsically, I think, sparks some of that motivation. And so I do. I find some of the goofiest, littlest things to try to give them an opportunity to be successful. It's real easy to go buy a Barra and, all right, we're going to make the sale at Hawaii this year. Okay, is that realistic? Okay, maybe it is. For some of you guys, you can get that done with your students, and that's good. But I'm pulling it back a little bit, and I'm like, all right, our motivation, our goal is let's make the county premium sell, or let's get a breed champion, or let's whatever. I had a student 2 years ago. And again, this is my mindset and some things that I think about. He had a kind of a unique SAE, and he went and he pushed cattle up for team ropings and sorted cattle and put horn wraps on and stuff like that. So I'm like, hey, we could do a proficiency on this. And so I'm like looking through proficiencies, right? Find those proficiency areas where there's not a lot of people competing. We turned it in an outdoor recreation, and he was the only one that got submitted, but we won the outdoor recreation proficiency area, right? So I think a lot of times we get hung up on, this kid's got a great beef cattle enterprise, and we're going to run that in beef cattle production, and we're going to try to win that, okay? Yes, that should definitely be a goal, but you might be able to steer that another direction. And again, these are things you guys have all thought about before, but where are those things? And then I've made these things a big deal. My ag room has got really tall 20-foot walls, the way they designed the building. So I have started printing, and again, this is just a new take on it, but I've started printing banners, kind of like state banners that you see in your gym, in your basketball gym, or on your football field, or something like that. So that's kind of a unique thing that I've started doing. So I've got a continuation banner up for county premium sale qualifiers, and I've got a banner up for that kid that won that proficiency. He's the only one that won the proficiency. I've got, I've had some other kids do pretty well showing livestock. And so bringing those younger kids in, it's like, hey, you want to get your name on that wall? You want to get a banner? And they do that in athletics. And I try to relate a lot of stuff to athletics too. They walk in the gym and they're like, hey, I want that scoring title, or I want this or that, right? Continuation plaques, if you haven't done those or thought about those, state degree ones are an easy place to start to motivate kids. And you can say, hey, your name can be up there when you're a senior, right? And these are things that we've probably talked about before and discussed, but maybe it's a good chance to get a reminder of what those things look like. But the banners have been a really, really cool thing, I think, for me. So if we have, a state winning team ever at some point, we'll have a state banner that says state champion this, right? Right now, we just had some kids qualify for the premium sale, but that's been a unique thing, continuation plaques. And again, it kind of established this who's chasing who, I feel like, and it motivates them to go, hey, yeah, I want my name up there. And I had a freshman kid this year. He was 5th at state in Green Hand Quiz. And another upperclassman did the Green Hand Quiz thing last year. He didn't devote as much time to it, but he's one of those kids that always has success. And so for this freshman to go, hey, I did better than he did at this, it had, for him and for others that have kind of done the same thing, it's kind of developing. It's slow. And again, we're getting around all these societal problems and things like that. But I've slowly seen this culture kind of start to develop and this positiveness and this competition, if you will. So that's kind of a thought. Again, where are CDE areas that you can have success instantly? Each one of us probably have a CDE contest area that we kind of have in our back pocket. That's pretty good. So you can take that group of kids and you can have instant success there, but then you can also kind of string these other kids along. And I tell them, and usually for those of you guys that have done CDE contests before, it takes time. I mean, sometimes if you just devote 1 year to one contest and you're just sold out, then you can be really successful. But for some of these 8th and 9th graders, I kind of give them small goals and small nuggets to achieve, if you will. And I tell them, I'm like, hey, if you're not here by the time you're a junior or a senior, yeah, then I'm going to be upset. Or then, if we don't know what this specific thing is, then we're not doing something right. We're not working hard enough. But give them just enough that you keep kind of building their confidence. And again, that's my thought. That's my mindset a little bit. So where are these CDE areas you can have instant success? We have in Central area, we have a spring CDE contest. So I tried to make the sweepstakes deal a big deal. Right? And for those of you guys that go to those junior college contests, or maybe I think Arkansas Oklahoma State Fair has a sweepstakes contest. We were fortunate enough to be 3rd behind Stillwater and Edmond. And we just showed up, and I'm like, hey, let's just try to. We hadn't studied every CDE contest, but it's just trying to find those things and those drivers that you can get those kids excited about something. And you guys all know this, and you probably do this on a regular basis, but I think sometimes we get kind of laser focused and get blinders on with we're just going to do this one thing. This one thing is what we can do to be successful, and that's it. It's either jump on board or stay on the dock, if you will. And I think there's more opportunities to try to motivate students if we just look at different ways of trying to present that to them. And again, so I try to find the gimme things, like what are the easy things that we can just get something, a nugget of something, and then maybe we run with it, and maybe we don't. And I tell them, like, you try something, and if it works, it works. If you hate it, then we can move on to something else. But anyway, that's a thought. Their freshman year is a really big year for finding some of these competitive things and again, making that stuff huge, whether you put it in the newspaper or you put it on social media or wherever. You're just trying to highlight that success, and kids love seeing their names places and being talked about. And you guys know this, but maybe how often do we really put our feet to the fire and practice some of those kinds of things? So finding resources to highlight and showcase student success. I talked about the banners. Put their names in the newspaper. If you're not doing that, I would recommend doing that more. Social media. I'm not the greatest at social media, Facebook and those kinds of things, but that is a platform where most of our parents, I think, and grandparents spend a lot of time. And again, when those kids see their names out there and they got their picture and they got their plaques or their ribbons or whatever, you're helping them build that confidence, right? And so, again, when we see our athletic teams in the newspaper or pictures being taken, we're just, again, showcasing that student success. One of the easiest things that I just forget about, probably this year more than any, that made a big difference for me was just simply putting their successes in the announcements. Some of your schools, that may be more difficult than others, but we would go to a contest or somebody would do something good with their animal or whatever, and I just put it in the announcements, and then they're reading that in front of their peers on a regular basis, daily, And so, again, it's just recognition and it's positive reinforcement. And it's, to us, it's like, that's not a big deal, right? But to those kids, for whatever reason, at least the ones I have, it seems like it's something that's really been good. And then another one to develop that competition, students helping students. Again, motivation. I don't think there's any other way to do that a lot of times than just have students help each other. It's kind of like, you know, I have two little kids, and I'm like, hey, you do this, and I tell them, and then their grandma comes and she tells them to do it, and then I'm like we've talked about that and we've done that and been around that, right? So I'll tell these kids, like, hey, you need to go study this, or you need to do, you know, however, this is our goal. And then another kid goes and tells them or presents it in a different way, and then it's just all of a sudden the light bulb turns on and they've figured it out. But that's a big thing that we've tried to talk about. A lot of schools will do like small groups. If you take your officer team and divide up all your membership and you have small groups, that's an idea or a thought to try to kind of get some one-on-one, have those students helping each other and engaging each other. Another thing that you can have those kids do is those older kids, obviously, have them train some of your younger kids. We know these things, right? But one thing I've been really big on is telling those kind of sophomore, junior, senior age kids. We really hadn't had seniors yet because we've been a K-8 school, and so this year was our first graduating class. But some of what I would call upperclassmen, I have them pick out like one or two kids, and I'm like, who's going to be your little brother, little sister, right? You guys have heard those kinds of mindsets or thoughts. And it's kind of got to be a competitive thing amongst some of those sophomores and juniors. They're like, oh, so-and-so 8th grader's my kid, right? And they're like, hey, I'm going to push you to do the creed, or I'm going to push you to do showing a pig. I can think of an 8th grade kid this year that had a pig. He came real close to making the premium sale, and he didn't. But such and such older kid is like, man, next year we are getting in the premium sale. I mean, I'm going to spend some more time, and we're going to do this. And so, again, these are things that we probably have talked about, and maybe some of us do in certain ways. And I'll tell those older kids, I've got another girl that I can think of, and I sat her down at one point, and I'll tell them, like, hey, I need you. I got to have you. And you just give them that sense of urgency, like, man, I'm important to this deal. And I'll tell them, like, hey, you're kind of the piece that we're building around this deal, and you're the one that, you know, grab so-and-so and help train them and help them get going. And I mean, again, these are things that some of you guys do, but maybe just some things that we don't always think about a lot of times. But definitely the more you can showcase student success, I think that has helped me a little bit. And really having those kids help each other has really been something that has got them really motivated. So whatever you can do to build a positive culture for everybody, it's going to be different because our communities are different, our schools are different. But I think if you keep kids at the center point of that and bear in mind their maybe background or you know, we're going to talk about some other things here in a minute, but those are things that can help just motivate. And big three, I've got that circled on my deal here to talk about. This is something for all of us, right? So we haven't had big three in 2 years here at OSU. This summer we're going to have that in July, here in a few weeks. My kids have never been to a big three. Some of y'all's kids may not have been to big three since they were littles, right? Since they were maybe in 4-H or something like that, because again, we haven't had stuff the last 2 years. So it's an opportunity that I have tried to, like, we got to go to big three. You guys are going to love this. This is going to be a blast. And again, we probably have some preconceived notions about some things, but we've all kind of got a chance to hit the reset button a little bit with some of these younger kids that haven't been exposed to some of this stuff. So I don't know. That's just a thought. It's been unique too, because if you talk about like the freshmen that I had this year, 2 years ago they were 7th graders. Is that right? And so again, going back to the societal stuff and just the shift and the swing in things, like the consistency and where education's been at, and it's just, there's a lot of stuff that kids haven't been exposed to or they haven't had the chance to do. They've gotten the opportunity to just sit at home on their butt and play video games or Instagram each other. I mean, we have a unique opportunity more than probably any other teaching field. Oh boy, 5 minutes, okay. To get those kids out there and get them doing stuff. And I'll take their phones away from them at things too. I think this might be one of my last things here. Create a community of purpose. How do we create a purpose? I talk to them a lot about goal setting, and we'll write down semester and yearly goals. Okay? Have them write that down. We've been ingrained in that since we've been to alumni camp, and every FFA thing we talk about is goal setting. Are you talking to kids about SMART goals? If you don't know what SMART goals are, look those up. Have them set short and long-term goals and try to hold them to that. Have them write it down. Like I'll have them taped up on a bulletin board or try to hang them from the ceiling or something. Well, I guess I can't in mine, but I'll hang them around different places. And I really try to have them set with that. I had a CDE team this year, and last year we didn't do as well, but our goal this year was to be top 5. Man, that was the one goal, and they get discouraged. I'm like, guys, remember, this is our goal. This is our goal. And so you can set those goals, and we talk about that kind of stuff. And sometimes you overachieve those goals, right? This is, again, stuff that is not rocket science, stuff that we've all thought about, but are you doing it, and is it something you can implement? Help them set those realistic goals for the short term and the long term. Over the next year or two, what do you want to accomplish? Over the next 4 years, do you want to get a state FFA degree? Do you want to be on stage at state convention? And that's a big one we talk about, being on stage. Another thing we talk about a lot is theme or purpose. Who are we? What do we stand for? What is North Rock Creek going to be about? That might be a thought in your different programs and your different chapters at home or with your officers. What are we doing? Like for us, it's what are we doing that's different? Okay, and some of that's just based upon some of our resources and constraints there. But what is that theme? What is that purpose? And a lot of that kind of stuff comes up at your officer retreats or different officer functions. But man, I'm really, really big on goals and goal setting. And Mr. Turner said it a while ago, I think. Small goals, small steps, baby steps. Set those things just a little bit at a time. And I think those are things that you'll see pay off. So I'm trying to think what are other things. I guess I would say the fundamental thing too that goes into student motivation at the very end of the day as well. We're caring about kids and that kind of stuff, but we all know students have to also be self-motivated, right? They have to have some type of inner spark and some type of intrinsic motivation, but we can also fuel that flame a little bit, I think. And that's something I'm continuing to work on. I'll try to get a kid to give a set of reasons, and it's like pulling their teeth out. And I'm just like, this is not rocket science. It's not hard. But man, they also have to go home, like he talked about, spend time putting that speech together. They have to spend time studying and doing those things. But for me, I just try to make everything a really, really big deal. I try to establish some of that stuff. Care about kids, I guess. To me, that's the thing that motivates them more than anything is when, what's that old saying about they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And so, again, I think if you give them that love and give them that attention, if you will, in a positive way, help them see that they can achieve some of this stuff, that confidence, that anxiety, and those problems that maybe some of them are dealing with, I think will change. I mean, I feel like it has a little bit for me, and believe me, I'm still working on it because it's been a really, really unique thing, trying to adjust for me to some of my traditionalist ways of thinking to, where are these kids at? What are they doing? What are they dealing with? How are they seeing the world versus maybe what we're used to talking about? And so, again, I can tell you story after story. I can think of another girl that showed a sheep this year, and she just, by the end of the year, she was like, I hate this and all these things, and these sheep are dumb. But again, our goal was to see how we liked it, see if it was something we wanted to do, try to make the premium sell. And we did, okay? And so a lot of times they can't get past what that little thing right in front of them is, right? And so you have to constantly keep reminding them, hey, this is our goal. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is where we're trying to get to, okay? It's not what's happening right now. It's what's down the road, what's in the future. I don't know. That's what some things that I've tried to think about. Maybe these are some things that could help you. Does anybody have any questions? I don't know where we're at. Got about 5 or 10 minutes probably. No, we're done. Time? Okay. I thought we were going to 11. I'm sorry. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, I'm just down the road, about an hour from here. jdavis@nrcps.org is my email. I'm definitely nobody special, and there's a lot of you guys in here that do a lot of things way better than I do, but I appreciate the opportunity to try to share some things that maybe could be helpful down the road. If anybody has any questions, I'll stick around for a little bit. Thank you.